been out for how long? Ochako asked, now back in her hospital bed. Izuku, taking a seat in one of the chairs the Urarakas had been in, sighed. It's been about 2 weeks since then, Izuku said, leaning forward and resting his arms on his legs. You were in pretty bad shape. Since you were wearing the gauntlets, Asagiri aimed most of her attacks towards your chest and stomach. It's honestly a miracle you were able to keep fighting. I don't want to hear that from you, Ochako said teasingly, with a smile. I remember bandaging your arms back in the forest. You shouldn't have been able to keep going that day either. I guess I'm just more like you than you realize. So I've been here for 2 weeks. I guess so, Izuku said with a chuckle. After we beat Asagiri I immediately brought you here. Thankfully, All Might and I got you and Monoma to Recovery Girl in just enough time to save you guys. Well that's good, Ochako said with a playful sigh. I wouldn't like to have died right after I got you back. Yeah, Izuku said. Ochako twitched a bit, hearing the nervousness and sadness in Izuku's tone. And what happened with Asagiri? Ochako asked. When word got to Aizawa that she had been captured, he immediately rushed back to the school the next day, Izuku said. She, along with her partner Yosuke, have both been taken into custody. It's insane Yosuke survived too after pumping Asagiri's blood into his arm. Aizawa said we don't need to worry about them. In fact, he said having them is a huge lead to where Shigaraki and the Liberation are. Ochako's eyes suddenly got wide as she sat completely up. Izuku. Shigaraki, he got all for one transplanted inside of him. We need to. I know, Izuku said, holding his hands up to calm Ochako. I know what's going on. Oh, I guess you've got a plan then. Ochako said, resting her back against the pillows once again. Izuku shrugged. Not really if I'm being honest. But it looks like the pro-heroes are organizing something. All Might said we'll get more information on it as soon as you wake up. Ochako nodded as she began looking out the window yet again. You still haven't explained how you got your memories back, Ochako said. Izuku nodded slightly. Well, when Yosuke erased my physical memories, they really had been erased. The thing is though, Yosuke's quirk has a hard time erasing memories from a person's quirk. Izuku said. Ochako looked back towards Izuku with a confused look. Your physical memories, a person's quirk, she repeated. What was that supposed to mean? Well, a quirk is connected not just to your body, but your spirit too, Izuku said, going into his familiar explanation mode. That's not just with One for All, but with all quirks. While my body forgot, my quirk remembered. Granted, Yosuke did mess up a bit of memory in One for All still. According to the previous users, my will was strong enough to keep my spirit in One for All connected. I'm assuming it's because I was trying so hard to protect Hima and Eri, my will was strong enough in spirit to overpower Yosuke's memory quirk. That's confusing, Ochako said, trying to keep up with Izuku's explanation. So there were 2 of you. Izuku shrugged. In a way, my quirk was able to keep my memories intact with my spirit, but since my physical body forgot that it even had a quirk, it was hard to merge my spirit and quirk back with myself. I guess. So yay, there were 2 of myself, one in captivity and one wandering inside One for All. I'm glad you didn't get to meet the old me. I definitely forgot how I used to be back in the day. Izuku said with a nostalgic smile. So, how did you reconnect? Ochako asked. Well, All Might touched my shoulder. I guess whatever remnants of One for All he had were able to reconnect me with his touch. Izuku said, shrugging yet again. It's all kind of confusing. Yay, it is, Ochako said, lost in thought. So what did your spirit do inside of One for All? I got to talk and meet with all of the previous users. Izuku said excitedly. It's crazy. They have chairs and everything where they talk. They told me what each of their quirks was and how to use it. Whoa, that's so cool. Ochako said, her eyes lighting up. Do you think I'll have all of those quirks too? Izuku's face fell just a bit, hearing Ochako's excitement. Ochako, catching Izuku's face fall, gave him a concerned look. Izuku, what's wrong? She asked nervously. Are you okay? Do you not like me having your quirk? No, of course not, Izuku said, waving his hands in front of his chest. That's not the issue. If anything, I think it would be super beneficial to have 2 One for Alls. No, I don't think your One for All would have the vestiges, quirks. I think Monoma copied the base of it. I'm sure you only have the stockpiling and the anti-gravity quirk. Well, okay then, but what's wrong with that? Ochako asked curiously. Izuku, now playing with his thumbs, looked down at the ground. Well, I learned another thing while I was in One for All. Izuku said quietly. It may just be with One for All. I don't know if other quirks apply by the same rules, but if a quirkless person, such as All Might or myself, have One for All, it basically becomes our quirk. It acts normal, or at least as normal as One for All can get. But if a person with a quirk has taken One for All, well. Izuku stopped. He looked around at anything he could, seemingly stalling as long as possible. Ochako watched as Izuku's eyes darted around before she couldn't take the suspense anymore. If a person who already has a quirk gets One for All, then. Ochako repeated. Izuku looked at Ochako in the eyes before sighing sadly. Then, their lifespan is cut short. Dramatically. Izuku said darkly. Ochako's eyes dilated in surprise. Her life was cut short. A person's body is only meant to hold one quirk, maybe All for One is an exception. Though he was pretty sick looking when he fought All Might. Izuku said in wonder. One for All itself is an exception too. It basically adds a copy of the quirk into its stockpiling, so it still acts as one quirk. But, your body already has the zero gravity quirk. So your body is trying to hold in both quirks. Eventually, your body won't be able to hold it all in. Well. I'll die, Ochako said slowly, looking at her hands. Izuku, what should I do? How do I get rid of it? I want to live a long life with you. I don't want to die early. Izuku shook his head, standing up with a confident gaze in his eyes. You won't. I have a plan, but I need to know. Are you all right with giving up One for All? Ochako nodded without a second thought. If it means living and staying with you. Absolutely, Ochako said. Izuku nodded, taking his phone out in order to send a text. Then I know just who to give it to. Izuku and Ochako waited until they heard the sound of the infirmary door open. Izuku stood, turning to face the blonde entering the room. Midoriya, it's good to see you. I hope I didn't take too long to get here. The tall teen said enthusiastically. Izuku chuckled. Your attitude never changes, Mirio. You really are one of a kind. Izuku said with a friendly smile. Mirio's smile grew even larger before turning his attention to Ochako, who was still in bed. Ah, Miss Uraraka, good to see you again as well. I haven't seen you since you joined us with Eri at the festival. Mirio said happily, his blue pupils shining. Ochako smiled in return. So Midoriya, you called me over saying you had something for me. Mirio said. Izuku nodded. Does this have anything to do with that quirk you tried to give me before? Mirio asked. While his smile remained, the tone in his voice had shifted. Izuku shook his head. Similar, but not quite. Look, Ochako has two quirks now. The villain we caught copied my quirk, and the only way to beat her was for Ochako to absorb it. At least that's the super short version. Izuku said. And Midoriya, I told you before, I don't want Mirio. If she keeps this extra quirk, she'll die. Izuku said seriously. The smile left Mirio's face as he looked between Izuku and Ochako. You know this for sure. Mirio said. Izuku nodded. The power she took can be given to someone else, Izuku said. Someone without a quirk can wield it without issue. And you don't have a quirk anymore. You would be able to be a hero again, and Ochako would be able to live a proper life. Mirio sat in silence for a few moments before nodding. How do I take the quirk? Mirio asked. Ochako gave Izuku a look. Actually, yay. How do I give it to him? Ochako questioned. Izuku smiled nervously. Okay, well, all you have to do, Ocha, is believe that you want to give up the quirk. And I'll do the rest. You trust me, right? Izuku asked, with a bit of a shaky voice. Ochako, with a questioning eyebrow raised, nodded. Great, then close your eyes and just believe you want to give the quirk up. Izuku said. Ochako couldn't help but give him a look. Izuku, are you serious? Ochako asked. Izuku nodded. Yes, it's a security measure. It can't be forcibly taken if you don't want to pass it down. You have to want to give it up. Izuku said. And like I said, I'll take care of the rest. Ochako stared at Izuku in disbelief for a moment before closing her eyes. I'm really sorry about this, Izuku thought. Ochako felt a yank on her head as she brought her hands up to her hair in pain. Ow! Ochako yelled, her eyes opening and darting up towards Izuku in anger, tears forming in her eyes. She looked on as a guilty-looking Izuku was now holding a strand of her hair. Why? Ochako yelled, crossing her arms. You just yanked out a strand of my hair. That hurt. Sorry, I need it, Izuku said, clapping his hands together in apology. I'll explain more in a second, just keep thinking about passing on the quirk. Are you gonna take another strand of hair? Ochako asked angrily. Izuku shook his head in fear. No, I promise, just please trust me on this, Izuku said, keeping his palms placed together. Ochako obeyed, closing her eyes, though her eyebrows remained furrowed in anger. Izuku turned towards Mirio, holding out the long brown strand of hair. Eat this. Ochako's eyes shot open in horror as Mirio continued to smile, apparently unfazed. Okay, Mirio said without question, though slight confusion could be heard in his voice. Ochako however burned a fierce shade of red. What? She asked loudly as Mirio took the strand and forced it down his throat. Mirio's eyes dilated as he suddenly felt the power coursing through him. Slight amounts of white-yellow energy sparked from Mirio as he stood. What an amazing amount of energy, Mirio said, looking down at his hands. Ochako couldn't help but be a bit surprised. Izu, I swear you better be glad that was true, Ochako said, still a bit salty about the transfer process. Izuku nodded. Well, Mirio, I guess you have the power of One for All and a copy of Zero Gravity now. If One for All took it, and I guess I better explain how the quirk works and what it truly is, Izuku started. However, Mirio held up a hand in protest. No need, Midoriya, he said plainly with a smile. Izuku and Ochako blinked. What do you mean? Izuku asked, confused. Mirio smiled. While I appreciate the thought of getting me a new quirk, I never intended on taking it, much less keeping it. This isn't my quirk. From what I understand, it's yours, just a copy of it. This isn't my power. I took it in order to save Uraraka's life. However, from what I understand, now that Uraraka no longer has it, then her life is saved, correct? Izuku and Ochako nodded, both very confused. Mirio smiled even larger. Then there is no more reason for me to have this quirk. In fact, I think I would prefer to have my old quirk back, Mirio said. He turned, Izuku and Ochako looking unbelievably confused, as he brought his hand to his mouth. Eri, could you come in here please? Mirio called out. The little silver-haired girl barged through the infirmary doors, seemingly having had to wait in the hallway before she could come in. Koko. Deku, Eri cried, jumping into Izuku's arms. Eri, I haven't seen you in so long, Izuku said happily, though still very confused. What are you doing here? Ever since you got kidnapped, Midoriya, Aizawa left Eri back in my care, Mirio said happily. And I was told that you taught her a bit on how to control her power. So, Eri, if you could do the honors. Mirio held his hand out to the little girl. Eri happily obliged, taking hold of Mirio's hand as her horn started to glow its familiar yellow light. Mirio closed his eyes, giving in to the power of rewind. After a few moments, Eri's horn stopped glowing as she pulled her hand back, still sitting comfortably in Izuku's arms. All done, Eri said happily. Mirio, with the largest smile Izuku had ever seen on him, jumped with glee. Though as Mirio started to land, he did not touch the ground. In fact, he went completely through the ground, his clothes being left behind. Izuku and Ochako stared at the clothing that now laid on the ground. Mirio used Eri to rewind his body. Izuku said in awe, meaning he has his quirk back. And the One for All copy is gone completely, Ochako finished. Mirio solved everything with Eri. However, before the two could converse anymore, the naked muscular body of Mirio shot back up from the ground. Izuku, gasping in surprise, covered Eri's eyes as Ochako covered her own eyes. Mirio chuckled sheepishly as he quickly picked up his clothes. Sorry about that. Well, I guess that solves the copy of One for All issue, Izuku said tiredly as Mirio got dressed. Deku, I can't see. Eri whined. However, Izuku shook his head, firmly holding his hand in front of Eri's eyes. As soon as Mirio was dressed, Eri was put back down, now sitting in bed cuddling with Ochako. Mirio and Izuku took a seat in both the chairs the Urarakas had left, now talking happily as Ochako played lightly with Eri as they continued to sit in the bed. "Well, Mirio, thank you," Izuku said as he and Mirio looked at the two girls as they had their own conversation. "You really saved the day. Thank you." "Of course," Mirio said. "Anything for a friend. Young Midoriya, young Uraraka, and young Mirio as well." A voice called from behind them. Izuku and Mirio turned as Ochako and Eri leaned forward, peeking from the bed. There stood All Might, a cheerful smile on his face. "Good to see you all doing wonderful." "All Might," Izuku said happily, "what are you doing here?" "Come to say hi to Ochako." All Might, his smile growing a bit smaller, nodded. "That, amongst other things. I'm sorry to barge in on the reunion, but this is urgent." Izuku, Mirio, and Ochako all grew serious as All Might walked closer. "I'm sorry to drop this on you just as you woke up young Uraraka," All Might said with a small bow. "But unfortunately we just can't catch a break. Does this have to do with the liberation?" Mirio asked seriously. All Might nodded. "Unfortunately so," All Might said, turning his attention to Izuku and Ochako. "I'm sorry you too. But, I need to ask, are you in fit enough shape to fight?" Kenlair here. "Okay, so I know a lot happened in this chapter. It was much more of a closing chapter, but this is not the end. I have a large arc that it's time to get into. This will be the largest arc out of the entire story. It may even be its own book. So stay tuned for the next chapter. Kenny boy."